At 7:42 a.m. on August 17, 1943, Technical Sergeant James McKenna crouched under the left wing of a P-38 Lightning at Dobodura Airfield in New Guinea, watching his pilot prepare for a mission he probably wouldn't survive. The pilot was Lieutenant Robert Hayes, 23 years old, 6 combat missions, 0 kills. The Japanese had sent 18 Mitsubishi A6M0 fighters to intercept the morning patrol. Hayes would be flying straight into them. McKenna had been maintaining P-38s for 8 months. He knew the aircraft inside and out. Twin-engine fighter, twin-boom design, fast in a straight line, absolute beast at high altitude. But the P-38 had one fatal problem that was killing American pilots every single day. It couldn't turn with a Zero. The Zero was lighter, more agile. It could execute a full horizontal turn in half the time a P-38 needed. In a dogfight, that difference meant death. American doctrine said P-38 pilots should never turn with a Zero, never try to outmaneuver them. Use speed, use altitude, dive in, shoot, climb out, hit and run. Don't get caught in a turning fight. Hayes had tried that doctrine 5 times. It hadn't worked. The Zeros were too smart. They baited American pilots into turns, cut inside their turning radius, got on their tail, shot them down. The 5th Air Force had lost 37 P-38s in the past 6 weeks. Most were shot down after being caught in turning engagements they couldn't escape. McKenna had watched too many pilots die. Good men. Kids, really. They climbed into their P-38s with confidence and came back in boxes, or didn't come back at all. The training manual said the problem was pilot error. The instructors said these pilots weren't following doctrine, but McKenna knew better. The problem wasn't the pilots. It was the control cables. The P-38's aileron control cables ran through the twin booms to the tail section, then forward through pulleys to the wing control surfaces. The cable system had slack. Not much, maybe 3/8 of an inch at full deflection. But that tiny bit of slack created a delay between stick movement and aileron response. At high speeds, it didn't matter. At low speeds, during hard turning maneuvers, that fraction of a second delay was the difference between rolling inside a Zero's turn and getting shot down. McKenna had mentioned this to the engineering officer 2 months ago. The officer said the cable tension was within specifications. Factory tolerances allowed for that slack. Changing it would void the aircraft warranty. Besides, no field mechanic had authorization to modify flight control systems. That required engineering approval from Lockheed, and Lockheed was 7,000 miles away in California. So McKenna did something that violated every regulation in the Army Air Force Maintenance Manual. He took a piece of piano wire from a damaged aircraft, cut it to 6 inches, bent it into a Z-shape, and installed it as a tensioner on Lieutenant Hayes' left aileron control cable. The modification took 8 minutes. It added 0.4 pounds of tension to the cable. It eliminated the slack completely. Nobody noticed. The inspection crew didn't check cable tension that morning. They were focused on engine oil levels and ammunition loads. McKenna said nothing. He watched Hayes taxi to the runway, watched him take off, watched the P-38 disappear into the morning sky toward the Japanese fighters. What happened in the next 17 minutes would change how every P-38 in the Pacific Theater flew. The first pilot McKenna lost to a Zero was Lieutenant David Chen, July 9, 1943. Chen had been in theater for 3 weeks. McKenna had worked on his aircraft every morning. They talked about California. Chen was from Sacramento. McKenna was from Long Beach. They had both worked on cars before the war. Chen took off at 06:15 on a fighter sweep over Leh. He came back 2 hours later with 3 bullet holes in his left boom and a story about a Zero that had gotten inside his turn. Chen said he tried to roll out and dive away like the manual said, but the airplane felt slow to respond, like there was a delay between when he moved the stick and when the aircraft actually rolled. The Zero almost got him. Only thing that saved him was his wingman shooting the Zero off his tail. McKenna looked at the bullet holes. They were in a tight group. Perfect deflection shooting. The Zero pilot had led Chen perfectly, had anticipated exactly where Chen's airplane would be. That shouldn't have been possible if Chen had rolled hard and dove immediately. unless the airplane had delayed just long enough for the Zero to get the lead right. Chen didn't fly again. His aircraft went back to the depot for repairs. McKenna never saw him again. 3 weeks later, he heard Chen had been killed flying a different P-38 over Rabaul. Same story. Caught in a turning fight. Couldn't roll out fast enough. The second pilot was Captain William Morrison. Morrison was a flight leader. Experienced. 11 kills. He knew the P-38 inside and out. Knew its limitations. Flew smart. On August 3rd, Morrison's flight intercepted 8 Zeros at 12,000 feet over Oro Bay. Morrison got 1 Zero on the first pass. Came around for another run. 2 Zeros reversed on him. McKenna heard the radio traffic afterward. Morrison tried to roll inverted and split S away. Called out that his controls felt mushy. The Zeros stayed with him through the maneuver. Shot him down at 4,000 feet. Morrison's wingman said it looked like Morrison's airplane wasn't responding fast enough. Like he was fighting the controls. Morrison died in the crash. Morrison's crew chief was a friend of McKenna's, a guy named Rodriguez from Texas. Rodriguez was convinced there was something wrong with Morrison's aircraft. He checked everything after they recovered the wreckage. Engine settings, control surface rigging, cable tensions. Everything was within spec. Nothing wrong with the airplane. The official report said pilot error. Rodriguez didn't believe it. Neither did McKenna. By mid-August, McKenna had watched 17 pilots die. Some he knew well. Most he'd only met briefly while doing pre-flight checks. But he'd worked on all their aircraft, had signed off their maintenance logs, had watched them taxi out, watched them take off. Some came back. Some didn't. The ones who came back told the same story. The P-38 felt slow to respond in hard maneuvering, like there was a slight lag between control input and aircraft reaction. Most pilots thought that was just how the airplane handled. Heavy fighter, big control surfaces. Some delay was expected. But McKenna knew that wasn't normal. He'd felt that delay with his own hands when he worked on the control cables, that tiny bit of slack in the system. He started paying attention to the sound the cables made when he tensioned them during maintenance. There was a specific tone, a sort of low twang when you plucked them. Loose cables sounded different than tight cables. McKenna could hear the difference. Every P-38 on the line had cables that sounded slightly loose, within spec, but loose. He mentioned this to Rodriguez one evening after Morrison died. Rodriguez asked what could be done about it. McKenna said, nothing official, but unofficially there was a solution. It just required breaking regulations that could get them both court-martialed. The problem wasn't that American pilots didn't know what to do. They knew. Every briefing emphasized it. Every training flight drilled it. Never turn with a zero. Use speed. Use altitude. Hit and run. The doctrine was clear. The problem was that combat didn't follow doctrine. Lieutenant Robert Hayes had been in New Guinea for 2 months. 23 years old. Farm kid from Iowa. He'd flown 6 combat missions and had 0 kills. Not because he was a bad pilot. Because he followed the rules. And the rules kept putting him in positions where he couldn't get a shot. On his 3rd mission, Hayes dove on a zero from altitude. Built up speed to 400 miles per hour. Came in from the sun like the manual said. Got the zero in his gun sight. Started to pull lead for deflection. The zero snap-rolled left and dove. Hayes tried to follow. His P-38 rolled into the turn but felt like it was moving through mud. By the time his aircraft pointed where he wanted it, the zero was gone. Hayes pulled out. Climbed back to altitude. No shot fired. 4th mission was worse. Hayes and his wingman jumped 2 zeros at 15,000 feet. Hayes got the first burst off. Missed. The zero reversed hard right. Hayes rolled to follow. His wingman called out 2 more zeros coming in from above. Hayes tried to roll back level and dive away. The airplane responded, but slowly. Just slowly enough that one of the diving zeros got a 3-second burst into Hayes' right boom. 20mm cannon shells. They didn't penetrate, but they scared Hayes badly enough that he broke off the engagement and ran for home with his engine smoking. 5th mission, Hayes watched his wingman die. The wingman's name was Lieutenant Thomas Parker, 21 years old, Boston. They'd gone through training together. On August 14th, Parker got separated from the formation during a dogfight over Finchhofen. 2 zeros got on his tail. Parker tried everything. Rolled hard, reversed, tried to scissor. The zeros stayed with him through every maneuver. Hayes heard Parker on the radio calling for help, heard the panic in his voice, heard him say his airplane wasn't turning fast enough, heard the gunfire, heard Parker scream. Then nothing. Hayes didn't sleep that night. Neither did most of the squadron. Parker's bed stayed empty. His personal effects got packed up and shipped home. His P-38 was written off as combat loss. The maintenance log noted no mechanical issues. The official cause was pilot error during defensive maneuvering. McKenna had worked on Parker's aircraft the morning he died. Everything was perfect. Engine timing, control surface alignment, cable tension within spec. The airplane was fine. But Parker was dead anyway. And McKenna knew why. That fraction of a second delay in the controls, that tiny bit of slack that the manual said was acceptable, it had killed Parker just like it had killed Morrison and Chin and 14 others. The worst part was the smell. Every morning McKenna worked in the maintenance area, the smell of aviation fuel and hot metal and hydraulic fluid filled his nose. It was the smell of aircraft preparing for combat. Some of those aircraft would come back, some wouldn't, and McKenna would be there the next morning, smelling the same smells, working on more aircraft, watching more pilots walk out to machines that couldn't respond fast enough to keep them alive. On the evening of August 16th, Hayes came to the maintenance area, found McKenna working on his assigned P-38. Hayes asked if there was anything McKenna could do to make the airplane roll faster, anything at all. Hayes said he didn't care if it was regulation or not, he just wanted a chance. McKenna looked at Hayes, saw the fear, saw the desperation, saw a kid who knew he was going to die if something didn't change. McKenna told Hayes to come back in the morning. He'd see what he could do. McKenna worked alone that night. The maintenance hangar was quiet after 2,300 hours. Most of the crew had gone to sleep. The only sounds were the distant rumble of generators and the buzz of insects against the overhead lights. The air smelled like engine oil and tropical humidity. He pulled the inspection panel off Hayes's P-38 left boom. The metal was still warm from the day's sun. Inside, the aileron control cable ran through a series of pulleys toward the tail section. McKenna grabbed the cable with both hands and pulled. Felt the slack. Maybe 3/8 of an inch of play before the tension caught. His hands were covered in grease and his fingers ached from a full day of maintenance work. But he could feel that slack. Clearly. It was wrong. He knew it was wrong. The piano wire came from a salvaged P-38 that had ground looped 2 weeks earlier. The aircraft was scrap, but McKenna had pulled useful parts before it went to the depot, including a 6-inch piece of high-tensile piano wire from the rudder trim system. He'd kept it in his tool bag without really knowing why. Now he knew. He sat on the hangar floor with the wire and a pair of pliers, bent it into a Z shape. The wire was stiff, fought back against the pliers. His hands slipped twice. Cut his thumb on the second try. The blood made the wire slippery. He wiped it on his coveralls and kept working. Took him 8 minutes to get the bend right. The Z-shape would act as an inline tensioner, would add just enough preload to the cable to eliminate the slack. Installing it was harder. The space inside the boom was tight. McKenna had to work with one hand while holding a flashlight with the other. The beam kept moving. Shadows jumped across the cable system. His shoulder wedged against the boom structure. The metal edge cut into his arm. He could feel sweat running down his back despite the night air. He disconnected the cable at the pulley junction. His fingers fumbled with the clevis pin. Dropped it. Heard it bounce somewhere in the boom. Spent 5 minutes feeling around in the dark until he found it. The whole time his heart was pounding. If the engineering officer found him doing unauthorized modifications to a flight control system, he'd face a court-martial. Possibly a dishonorable discharge. Maybe prison time. But Hayes was going to die if McKenna didn't do something. He inserted the piano wire tensioner between the cable end and the pulley. Reconnected the cable. The fit was tight. He had to force the clevis pin through. When it finally seated, he tested the tension by hand. Pulled on the cable. No slack. The control surface moved immediately. Perfect.